please help me welcome to our stage Mr. Albertson.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be part of a fantastic panel. No, Mo, you're not the only one with gray hair, so, you know, we're brothers. Don't worry about it. Let's start. I'm a native. I'm from here, from Montreal, born and raised, and I grew up in a family that really encouraged a lot of discourse. We always talked about politics. We always talked about current events, and I was always very interested in what's happening in the world. I wasn't a very strong student in high school, I have to admit. I reached high school, I got to grade 7 after my first year grades. My guidance counselor took a look at me and says, I really think you should be looking into trade shop or mechanics because I really think you should be doing a career with your hands as opposed to doing something with my mind. I was an average student until I finally discovered something, and I discovered topics that interest me. I discovered history, I discovered political science, I discovered economics. And these were topics that interest me because it was something that I was discussing already at home. We were talking about policy, we were talking about economics, we were talking about what's happening in the world. And I started to excel. And these were the topics for me. I moved on to CEGEP, and I concentrated on these topics. I took economics classes, I took poli-sci, and I assumed that it's at this point where I finally realized I think I have a passion. I think this is it. I think this clicks because I'm excelling. I'm doing well in school. But I have a pragmatic side to everything I do in life, and so my pragmatic side said, no, you got to stick to the sciences, you got to do math, you got to do chemistry, you got to do physics. But it turned out to be a really bad idea because I failed in those courses. And I took these courses believing that, moving into a career in accounting or engineering was more respectable, and it would give me some sort of guarantee of a job after I would finally finish this academic tunnel. Not fully knowing what I wanted to do, though, in having this curiosity about the Middle East region, I decided to take a gap year when I finally finished CEGEP. And I took a year off, and I traveled. And in my travels, I landed in Tel Aviv at the time when Scud missiles were falling, and this was during the first Gulf War. And well, guess what? I was stuck. I couldn't leave the country. Borders were closed, no flights out, no flights in. I had to stay there. I called the embassy. I said, you got to get me out of here. And he says, well, you're the one who decided to go there, so, good luck. And so I stuck it out. I survived, and I lived through that experience, and I ended up staying there because I found a job on a cruise ship, and I spoke all these different languages. So it was great. It was a fun experience. I finally came back to Canada, and I realized that through this experience, what did I want to really do in life? And I said, well, it's got to have some kind of international element to it. And I have to travel because that's, these are the two things that I really enjoyed. And so I embarked on a career at university, an academic career, doing a bachelor's degree in commerce. But I didn't start off in commerce. I started off in poli-sci because that's where I excelled. I mean, political science to me was what was good. I mean, that's what I'm used to. So naturally I excelled, but of course, my pragmatic side is always with me, right? I mean, I'm always thinking of these different things. And so the pragmatic side kind of veered me back to the commerce stream. And so I finished my commerce degree, and I specialized in international business concentration. But you have to understand that back then, and I'm not going to date myself, but back then, Google didn't exist. I know it's a shock to most of you, but how did you survive? How did you do research? Oh my God. When I say this to my kids, they think, they have such compassion. Daddy, how? And so I spent my days at the resource center, at the Career Resource Center. And I started reading. And I started picking up books. One of my favorite was What Color is Your Parachute? I don't know if anybody has read that book, but back then they were updating it every single year, and I would read it every single year. And because it taught me on how to network, and it taught me about job hunting. I read this other book called Knock 'em Dead Resumes, Knock 'em Dead Cover Letters. I don't know if these books still exist, but that's what I did. And it's at this point that I finally made the connection with the word passion. And you know, what does this really mean? Passion is a very loaded word because it can mean so many things to so many people. I realized that my passion was what was interesting for me at that time. That was analyzing. I liked analysis. I liked political analysis. I enjoyed commenting on the political process. I enjoyed debate. So I spent time at the Career Resource Center almost every day. I would go there, spend at least an hour reading the newspapers, trying to keep up with current events. I read The Economist, and I read other books. And as I was expanding my vocabulary, I got introduced to words like internship, informational interviews, networking, international exchange, work field experience. Wow, like this is good. So while I researched this, I started getting involved on campus with all this new knowledge of networking. So I joined the debate team. I participated on on-campus sports. I participated as well as on-campus protests. I was active. I was active on campus. And I took on a work field experience because through my research, and I ended up going to work on a communal farm. So I was a banana picker. And that lasted about 24 hours because it was the most difficult job of my life. I've never had such a hard job. And I had bruises after those 24 hours because it was so hard. So I went to the handler. I said, look, I can't pick bananas. You got to give me something else. So he did, and I ended up staying there for a couple of months. But after I finished that, I started getting on the phone. I started calling people. I started cold calling. And this is such a hard thing to do. I can't emphasize how hard cold calling is, but I did it. And at the beginning, it was hard because the rejection was just too extreme. Everyone just, people hang up on you. People say, I don't have time for this. How did you get my number? Why are you calling me? And so I persisted. I persisted so much that two things happened to me that kind of changed my perspective on things. The first is that I got my first internship. And my first internship was with ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is a UN agency. And my job wasn't so exciting, but it was an internship. I got in. And I started networking on the inside. So I started talking to people, and I went to speak to the Hungarian ambassador, who was a super nice guy. And I said, I want to stay here. I like it here. And he says, I think there's something for you, and I think I found exactly what you need. And so he referred me to someone, and that opened up a job as in the field mission, a UN mission, and they sent me to Haiti, Port-au-Prince. And let's just say it was a very scary experience for me because it was one of my first times really being overseas. I was living on the UN compound, and we had RCMP officers everywhere, which was, I felt secured. The second thing that this persistence gave me was that I went on an international exchange. And so after, I finished my time at the UN, and I ended up moving to France. I went to live in the south of France, in the French Silicon Valley, which is called Sophia Antipolis, which is right next to Nice. And tonight it's minus 22, but over there in the winter, it was a balmy 18. So it was a very comfortable exchange program. But I continued on this path of discovery, still talking to people, seeking informational interviews. And this exchange program led me to my first internship in marketing. And I worked at the airport of Nice, helping the duty-free sections to increase their sales. And at the same time, with continuing to network, I met these two Americans who started talking to me about graduate school, and says, yeah, you finish your degree, naturally you're going to be doing graduate school. And I was like, yeah, graduate school, yeah, I better think about that too. And so they talked to me about a program that was specializing in international development. And I said, yeah, I think that's what I want to do. That seems just about right. That's me. That's what I want to do. And this graduate school is located in Italy. And so I moved to Italy. I got accepted. I moved to Italy. I spent a year there. I ended up applying to 4 schools that year. 2 of them accepted me, but none of them were my first choice. But I accepted the offer, and I went to live 1 year in Italy. And then the second year I lived in Washington, D.C. And this program allowed me to specialize in international economics and to enter the field of development economics. What I ended up doing actually is that I researched the university, and I realized that there's a very high number of graduates that were working in international development. So naturally I said to myself, well, I mean, if the graduates find this work, maybe I can follow in the same footsteps. And so here is where my passion steps back in, because during my high school days, I mean, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had a very persistent mother that was whispering in my ear, lawyer, doctor, lawyer, doctor, lawyer, doctor. Well, yeah, mom, thanks. But so what I learned during this travel and this studying in the south of France is that passion is what you're good at. It's you will know what you're good at if you practice it. And passion is not about dreaming about being a pro basketball player or pro tennis player and hopefully playing in Wimbledon. Passion is about practice. It's practicing what you enjoy. The way to develop passion is by experiencing different things and then practicing the experiences that you enjoy. I had just finished a commerce degree, and the idea of repeating an MBA just didn't click. So I did this international economics master's, and I spent my time calling people. And my insecure side again came stepping into my life again and said to me, international development, what are you going to do with that? Try investment banking. So I said, okay. So I started calling people, and I started talking to people in investment banking. And I called one alumni, and I asked him, I said, can you give me 3 minutes? He says, yeah, sure. And I asked him one question, and I asked him, I said, talk to me about your industry. The man spoke to me for 30 minutes, And he spoke to me about him, and about him, and about him, and about him again. And at the end of this 30-minute conversation, what he said to me was, wow, this was a great conversation. Maybe it's worth it for you to come down and visit us in New York City. And I said, yeah, okay. Remember, I didn't say a word. I said, great, I'm going to get there. And I took the Peter Pan bus. So it was this, old midnight run bus. It was at midnight, you take this bus, 5 hours, you sit on this smelly bus. It's a milk run. It stops everywhere. And you finally get to New York City. I got there at 5 a.m. I was exhausted. I was drinking coffee from 5 to 8 a.m. by the time I got to the World Trade Center. And 8:15, I pick up the phone at the lobby, and I call him up. I say, hey, I'm here. I finally got here. All coffeeed up, of course. And he brought me up, and I started meeting the analysts. And he introduced me to one of the partners. It's great. By the time I left there, I received a job offer. I received a job offer with Lehman Brothers. I mean, this was a very prestigious investment bank. This is big time. This is the big leagues. I came back home during the Christmas break, and I was just moping around the house. My mom says, what's your problem? And I said, yeah, well, I kind of got a job. And she said, so congratulations, I guess. What's your problem? I said, well, I don't know if this is for me. And my mom said to me, did you ask him what he does all day? And I said, wow, that's a good question. I didn't think of asking him that question. I mean, he spent 30 minutes talking about himself, and I spent a day in New York City talking to all these analysts, and I never asked him, what does he do all day? And so I headed back to DC. It was the first week of January, and so I pick up the phone and I call him up, and I said, hi, John, it's Albert. I have one question for you. He says, yeah, shoot. I said to him, how do you spend your days? And he says, well, listen, Albert, I'm always here by 7. I never leave before 11. And for some strange reason, I retorted, by 11 a.m.? It's like, no, 11 p.m. I was like, wow, okay. I said, well, what about your weekends? And he answered, what about my weekends? He says, what about them? He says, well, I work. And I said, well, what about your wife? I mean, what does she say? And he said, oh, she understands. And it's at that moment, at that precise moment, something clicked. I heard a break, something cracked. And at that moment, I just said to him on the phone, I'm not sure this is for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I experienced the deadliest 7 seconds of my life. A silence, 7 seconds of silence. And he said to me, no one says no to Lehman Brothers. And he hung up. Let me tell you something. That feeling of being hung up after receiving a job offer of 80,000 USD, living in New York City with a possibility of 2 times the base for bonus. Forget about moping around the house. I was moping around on campus. My friends were saying, oh my God, I think you're a loser. What the hell did you do? You can't say no to them. You just take it. Take the job and do it. It wasn't for me. And it took me 3 weeks of utter depression. And I finally found an internship that paid me exactly $0. That job was working at the World Bank Africa Technical Department. And my job was to work on a design structure of micro-lending to French-speaking females in a Francophone Africa. So here it is, I found it. I finally found it. Politics, economics, international development, all rolled into one. This experience finally nailed it for me that, this is what my passion is. I wanted to work in development. I wanted to work in Africa. I wanted to make a difference in people's lives. I wanted to be that change. Of course, many of you can say, wow, that's very pretentious of him. But for me, this was what I wanted to do. This is it. I finally found it. And I wanted to make a change. My first assignment was in Lomé, in Togo, in West Africa, and I was assigned to a team to design a program of micro-lending to women. We came across a fantastic example, which was a lady. She had 6 kids. She was illiterate. She lost her husband. She was a widow. But she was living on a street corner, very busy street corner. It's pretty amazing because there was a lot of traffic that was coming in there. And she had 2 very important ingredients in life. One, she had a will to succeed. And 2, she had really a good location for a possible business. And her idea was to make sandwiches and homemade juices and sell it to all the crowd that was driving by. And she needed the money. She needed a bank loan. So she went to the bank and she was rejected. I mean, she's illiterate. I mean, what guarantee does a bank will ever have whether she will ever pay it back? And so here I am. I'm researching this. And we find out that the lady needs $10. The equivalent is about 10 USD. What's my first reaction? I go, here's the 10 bucks. Just take the 10 bucks. But that's the wrong lesson. And so the World Bank designed the program so that way she can borrow the money. She borrowed the money, she built her business, 6 months later she paid it back, and she became self-sustainable. This is what I wanted to do. This is it. This is finally where I found my path. These experiences led me to other passions, and I ended up working for USAID. I was chief of mission in Morocco, and at that time I was the youngest chief of mission in Morocco. I was 30 years old. I'm not American, I'm a French-speaking Canadian, and I got hired. I ended up going, after that, working for Paul Martin when he was finance minister in Ottawa, and I was also working, after that, I ended up working for Colin Powell when he was Secretary of State. Passion, though, is a very funny word. Because you see, this entire time I didn't mention to you that I'm also a professional soccer referee. And I built that career because it's been my lifelong passion. Soccer has always been in my life. And I always dreamed of being, a professional sports player. I had this thing that I was going to be in the crowd and everyone's going to scream, and that was me. But instead of practicing soccer, I read books. I mean, I was a bookworm. I read about the game, I read about the rules, I read about the economics of it. I mean, all I did was read. So I mean, yeah, it's a great passion, but if I'm not doing it, chances of me getting there was close to none. I was 25 years old, living in Italy at the time. I needed a job, and my roommate said, go to the local association, take the course, and you'll become a referee. They pay you in cash. I said, yeah, pay me in cash, great. And so I did that. I studied in Italy to become a professional referee. And then I moved on. I moved out to the United States. I continued my education there. I went to Africa and I continued there. And I finally reached a level of national level referee, which is one step before becoming an international FIFA referee. And so life had it that I had to move back to Canada. My wife and I wanted to start a family, so we moved back here to Canada. And I didn't get my international debut as an international referee until I was 39 years old. And I got to Manchester City Stadium, 20,000 fans, England versus Switzerland. That was me. I was right there in the center. I started working for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce at a time, and I was the Quebec bureau chief there. And I kind of came to the realization that, you know, life has to be more than just sitting behind a desk, 9 to 5. It's got to be more. You can't just be just this. And I knew at that moment that I had to take a leap of faith. I had to listen to my inner self and do something that was for me and that I truly enjoyed, my passion. I attended this conference and I sat down next to a McGill researcher, and she said to me, you know, we were talking about different subjects, and I said, what are you researching? And she's talking to me about obesity in kids. And I said, well, what's this about? She goes, you know, we're at epidemic levels in Quebec. Epidemic? I mean, that's such a big word. And she says, yeah, it's at a you know, an incredible level. I said, what is it about? Is it because of the chips and the soft drinks? She says, look, this is just a minor part of it. She said to me, the real issue is that kids are not active. So I said, why? Is this because of technology? And she says, no, because kids just don't have a positive role model. I said, what are you talking about? There's David Beckham, there's Wayne Gretzky, there's PK Subban. I mean, there's great models out there. And she says, what you need to understand is that kids are motivated by their parents. Their first hero is mommy and daddy. If mommy and daddy are sitting behind the tube, eating chips, watching TV, guess what the kid's gonna do? If mommy and daddy are out there playing sports, well, guess what? And so I had an epiphany. I had my moment. At that moment, I realized that corporate social responsibility had to be that companies had to encourage you, working professionals, to be active, to stay healthy. And so by that, I put my passions all into one ball of wax. Soccer, I put in my economics training, politics, everything. And I started a soccer league right here in the city for corporate players, for corporate teams. I spent a year on the phone talking to CEOs. And guess what? They all rejected me, all of them. So you stupid, man. What are you wasting my time with this? And I said, no, you don't understand. This is a good idea. And you know, your employees need to exercise, need to get out there. And so I started in 2007 with 120 players, 6 teams. And here's where my passion sticks in, right? So I didn't stop there. Today, 10 years later, we have 8,000 players, 220 companies, all of them Fortune 500 companies across the country. And I pushed it to the level where I started the International Federation of Corporate Football. Today we're in 46 countries around the world. We have close to 2 million corporate soccer players around the world. All this based on passion. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, it's very simple. You know, you have to pursue what drives you, but remember that passion is based on your experiences. Everything that you do, all the experience that you put in, that's what's going to drive you to get to that next level. I learned from my experiences and I combined them into my passion of soccer, politics. Today I'm making an impact in people's lives and I feel it, I see it, and that's what I wanted to do. Thank you very much.